Now let's continue our introduction to the .NET Framework. I've got this little graphic here to introduce you to the .NET Framework, and so you can see how important the technology is and how it fits in relationship to the operating system and to applications. The OS, the operating system, is the foundation, and then we have the Common Language Runtime, which we'll go into later, and then there's the .NET Framework Class Library, and then finally there's the application layer. This is how your application will look in .NET. Okay, let's jump into the framework for a brief look. The framework is a set of pre-built components that comprise the framework's class library. It's a very extensive set of classes that provide functionality that can be leveraged by the developer, regardless of what .NET language that he or she works with. The functionality available spans many aspects of applicational functional requirements, from user interface for traditional Windows applications to web applications and ASP. There are also classes for data access and database connectivity, and classes that allow you to access and manipulate files and directories. There are also classes in the framework for cryptography, classes to support web pages and web application development, and a whole host of numeric algorithms and network communications. You should keep in mind that this list is by no means complete, and there is a lot more cool stuff in the framework. Now, all of these components or classes in the .NET Framework are organized into a hierarchical manner, and all of these related classes in the hierarchy are organized into groups that we call namespaces. The Common Language Infrastructure is an open specification developed by Microsoft that describes the executable code and runtime environment that form the core of the Microsoft .NET Framework. This allows applications to be written in multiple .NET programming languages to operate in many different environments without the need to modify program code. The CLI consists of a portable executable format, a common type system, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later on, an extensible metadata system, again, which we'll talk about soon, an intermediate language, a framework class library, and that gives us access to the underlying operating system. Now, all of these Microsoft implemented languages and the third-party languages have something crucial in common. That is, that they all generate Microsoft Intermediate Language, or MSIL. MSIL is just-in-time compiled into native machine code, which is called an assembly, as it's required for execution. So you should think of an assembly as you would a standard executable, and like a standard executable, the assembly may be compiled into a .exe or a .dll. The assembly includes all the necessary references to the .NET Framework class that it requires in order to run. And there's much more to assemblies, and we'll dig deeper into all of that as we move through the course. The Common Type System, or CTS, is a component of the Common Language Runtime, or CLR, that ensures that all .NET applications use the same basic data types, regardless of the programming language that's used to develop the application. The Common Language Specification, or CLS, is a basic set of rules that any .NET language targeting the CLI should conform to in order to interoperate with any other CLS-compliant languages. The Common Language Specification specifies a subset of the Common Type System, or CTS, and sets up conventions that have to be adhered to by both the programming language designers and the framework class library authors. The CLS ensures language interoperability by defining a set of features that developers rely on to be available in a wide variety of .NET languages. The CLS also establishes requirement for the CLS compliance. The Common Language Runtime, or CLR, provides all the services necessary for an application to execute. The CLR manages execution in threads, coordinates memory management and garbage collection, and it also manages security. The key takeaway term here is CLR manages. .NET applications are managed by the CLR and are referred to as managed applications. One question you may ask is, okay Tim, you talk about managed code as opposed to what? Unmanaged code? Well, if you're wondering that right now, then you really are getting the right idea. You're correct. Managed code versus unmanaged code. The bottom line here is managed code or a managed application is a .NET application. Unmanaged code is not. Managed code is code that has its execution completely managed by the Common Language Runtime. The managed execution environment essentially monitors the application and guarantees what the code is going to do. This managed environment can insert traps and perform garbage collection, handle exceptions, check and enforce type safety, and much, much more. Unmanaged code is essentially any executable file or binary image that is based on the x86 code that is loaded into memory. Basically, it's code that you may have developed before .NET came along. That old code offered no protections around memory and no memory management. The operating system didn't really know what the code was doing apart from whatever service calls were made to it in order to support I/O. That means that the operating system could not guarantee what happens when the application runs. Unmanaged code is still with us, and you can still use unmanaged code in the .NET world. What we do is essentially call the unmanaged code using a platform invoke or p-invoke. Essentially what the CLR does when you call an unmanaged module with p-invoke is that it sandboxes or the unmanaged code so that it can't adversely affect memory or the unmanaged applications. So in this lesson we got an introduction to Microsoft.NET. We also got a pretty general understanding of what .NET is all about and had an opportunity to get some exposure to the basic core concepts and standards implemented and embodied with .NET. We also got our first look at the .NET framework, namespaces, the CLR and the CTS, and had a brief introduction to managed and unmanaged code. So, thank you for watching Lesson 1. Let's move on to Lesson 2.